Okay, and we're recording. So welcome to XR local media training with our own Jamie Kelsey Fry from the New Internationalist. We're going to be doing an hour-long session with Jamie about how to interact with local media and how to make them work for you, rather than the other way around, not playing by the media's game. And if people who are live participants in this training want to ask any questions at any point, you can do so through the chat, and I'll kind of facilitate those questions by dropping them in at the end of the training. So Jamie Kelsey Fry, take it away.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks very much, Robin. All right, I'm going to just give you a little bit of background. I've done about 130 sessions on mainstream media, so that's everything. Sky News, live on Channel 4. Unbelievably, I was on BBC Radio today, Radio 2 today, at the Jeremy Vine Show, talking about the youth climate strike tomorrow. So isn't that handy, ladies and germs? That's 6.9 million people, which is incredible, right? So the first point I want to make is this, folks. This is really, really important. Everyone looks at media opportunities as a great opportunity to platform or raise awareness about our ideas. Of course, that's true. But if it's not handled correctly, it's also an opportunity to really smash and damage a campaign, okay? Because the media is not always going to be your friend, and the media has lots of tricky ways of trapping you and making you look bad. All right, one of the worst things in the world is when a huge amount of effort has gone into a direct action, for example. People have been brave, people have risked arrest, risked incarceration, but they really believed in it, and yet the media side of that action was terrible and actually ended up making the movement, the campaign, the direct action look rubbish in the eyes of the public. So it's incredibly important to sort of develop your skills in your regional groups. Make sure that, if you're doing an action on Saturday, for example, they are down here in North Devon, all right, when the media turn up, you have your designated media people who will deal with them, who will take the interviews. Okay, so you've got people who are really well prepared. It's all in the preparation, okay? So remember that, folks. It's not only a way of platforming your campaign and making it successful, it can be a dangerous way by which your campaign can be damaged. All right, so here's the first, and I would say pretty much, if you want to capture in one picture, the real main thing that you're aiming for, it's in this highly complicated mathematical graph. Now, Robin and I have only just realized that because you can see it's mirror writing. So what that says there is empathy, and what that says there is credibility. Now, the fact is, let's get that light out of the way a bit. Right, so the fact is, we will be often, even with regionals, you may well be, paired up against someone who's sort of against your campaign, who's going to be critical of your campaign. And we found in the past, in various activist sort of media situations, very often the person who may be put against you, who's critical of you, they're highly trained. They're highly trained people, getting media training, tens of thousands of pounds, for God's sake, all right? We don't have that money, but they do. So we need to look at how they will act and anticipate how they will act. But this is the main thing, folks. You are in the rebellion. So in terms of empathy, as long as you're clear, in terms of empathy, of course, the vast majority of the audience are going to support you, love you, feel you. They'll feel empathy for what you're talking about. That's the empathy axis. But without credibility, that can destabilize your strength in the eyes of the audience, all right? And so I'd like you to, if anyone's taking notes, write down this name, Mark Littlewood. He's one of the most highly trained sort of cheerleaders for neoliberalism I've ever come across. Mark Littlewood. He works for the Institute for Economic Affairs. All right, so the Institute for Economic Affairs sounds pretty reliable, but of course it's funded by the fossil fuel industry. The tobacco industry, we know for sure, funds it. There's a lot of indication that it's also the fossil fuel industry. They're very closed about what industries are funding them, but basically they're cheerleaders for neoliberalism. But the point is, look at how Mark Littlewood performs. Okay, you can be listening to him and going, hey, he makes really good sense. It's because he knows how to be very credible but he also knows how to nuance language and express himself in a way where people go, yeah, I can really feel him. It's only when you sit back and analyze what he's just been communicating to you that he's been saying it's okay that 8 people own half the world. And you've walked away from the TV screen going, yeah, Mark's kind of right. Of course he's not. The point I'm making is your empathy is strong because you're in the rebellion. We're trying to stop this disastrous climate emergency. We're trying to preserve a future for future generations. Of course you've got empathy. If you look at what's happening tomorrow, and I know Mim is out there and a number of people are going to be doing media around the students' climate strike tomorrow, of course you've got lots of empathy factor, but be credible. And this little green thing here, that's the sweet spot. So you have maximum empathy, maximum credibility, and that's what we're reaching for, okay? The sweet spot. All right. If anyone's making any comments about not being able to hear me correctly, then do shout at me, Robin. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going, folks. Okay, thanks. All right. So that is your. Oh, you see, you can't read that either. So credibility and empathy, sweet spot. You see, I've made little shiny stars.
They're readable, Jamie. That's all right.
Yep. All right. So know your audience. All right. So, folks, what's the show that you're going to be on? If you're going to be on like the Jeremy Vine show that I was on today, all right, so that's a real sort of middle England, okay, the total wide demographic of England. It's people working, working in mechanics, working in their garage. It's a load of nurses on their downtime in the office, okay, so it's a real wide span of the sort of working class of this country, and it's usually on in the background, and he's very, very influential for that reason. So that's a specific kind of audience. All right. And then it's going to be different to Newsnight, or if you're on LBC, you know, folks, if you want to really practice, listen to Nick Ferrari on LBC. He'll rip your throat out. He absolutely really is against protesters and activists. So you have to understand how to deal with someone like that. But more importantly, anticipate your audience, know your audience. That will help you nuance what language you use, etc. All right. So a useful thing that I use is Mark. Okay, Mark is doing the ironing, and he's sort of over the other side of the room from the TV screen, and the TV screen's turned only a little bit up, and he's really not that interested. He's just doing a load of ironing. That's who your target is. Why would you, out of all the other voices that are in the background, why would you stick out? And there's specific tools I'm going to give you that bring it down to how you look physically and how you use your body. All of these things, you need to look at Mark, who's disinterested. All right, bear this in mind. You are simply content. So a good example of that is I did the Matthew Wright show when he was on Channel 5. And, that was for Occupy. And of course, I had my 4 minutes. And before me was Joanna from Big Brother. All right. And so that's what the audience were interested in. And there's suddenly me talking about global revolution against the 1%. And then after I did my slot, they went, and now gastric bands. So you are just content. You're literally content. So you've got to understand that the way you fit into the viewing of the people who are watching, all right, is very important. If they're expecting stuff like you, that's fine, but they generally won't be. So how do you fit into the mood and the ambience of that particular show? Another good thing to practice is, your embarrassing auntie or uncle who's racist, or a climate change denier, or, the people who are really at the opposite ends of your belief system. You have to learn to talk with them. Where do you meet? We're going to be talking about climate change a great deal with Extinction Rebellion, obviously. So if you're trying to argue with people who are saying, no, that you've got the science wrong, well, then don't try and meet them at science. Talk to them about the fact that, the global insurance industry has been planning for climate breakdown for the past 25 years. Or talk to them about the fact that the army have been training for the effects of climate breakdown for the past 25 years. Come at them at different angles, but never just slam people down. Be respectful, okay? So knowing your audience is really important, okay? And imagine Mark who's doing the ironing, all right? I'll give you a really good one, okay? So I used to do quite a lot of work on anti-fracking, and I ended up having a meeting with a fellow who's like a really well-known PR person, and I met him in a coffee house, right? And he just sat down and he just laid into me completely. He laid into me completely, saying, why do I care? Why on earth, right? Who the hell do you think you are to be so self-important that you can tell me how to live? I'm going to eat my pizza. I'm going to burn my energy. I don't care about what's happening in the future. And he laid into me. It's the first thing he did. And I was so angry that I was nearly like, jump up and go, God, because that's no good, is it? And then he said, okay, you get what I'm doing. You get what I'm doing. Turn it around. And then he said, you be the pro-fracker. And then I suddenly became a pro-fracker. So what I'm getting at, folks, is look at it from all different angles. You're not talking to people like you, all right? You're not talking to people like you generally. You have to understand that, so know your audience and embrace the differences and understand how to talk to them. At the end of the day, our commonalities are far greater than our similarities. Our similarities are far greater than our differences. So try and tune into that, all right? Don't play those heartstrings of, how dare you? What about the children of the future? Find where you can meet people. And often that's on their stories, their narratives, how their lives are, okay? If I started a talk, well, okay, so with the show I did today on the Jeremy Vine show, I was a teacher for 25 years, okay? So that's really important to bring in straight away because we're talking about young people. So the point I'm making here, right, is make it their struggle. That's what it says if you have a mirror. So make it their struggle. What that means is, how do you personally connect to the story? Okay, so rather than coming across as, oh, you're just talking theoretically, how do you personally connect to the story? Have you traveled abroad at any time and actually seen the living effects of climate breakdown already? Have you had an experience around, the mass growth in refugees seeking freedom from countries that have been devastated by climate change or devastated by kind of continually failing crops that have led to civil wars? Is there a personal experience? If you're talking about the effects of austerity on people with disabilities, so who do you know who's a disabled person? Who can you talk about personally? Make the story personal, so you make it your struggle. There's a personal connection, because the moment you do that, then the viewers and the listeners are going to start to relate to you, okay? Try not to talk in abstract ways or theoretical terms at all, okay? The human interest, all right? One of the things that really works for everybody in this country is anger at being ripped off. In fact, that's actually psychologically a real human trait. You can get people to really light up immediately if they feel like they're being robbed. So lines now like, the bankers got bailed out and we got sold out. Pretty much everyone in the country lights up on that. So maybe you can meet them on a shared anger. So let's look at climate change, look at the effect of fossil fuel industry and their lobbying on government. People can understand this kind of language now. Talk about, the revolving door. If you talk about George Osborne, who was the Chancellor here, then going straight into BlackRock, sitting on the board of directors with BlackRock, when he had just been rewriting the pension laws and then going into a company that will benefit from the rewriting of the pension laws. In other words, think about the mechanisms by which people are being robbed and screwed over. That really gets people. And again, that will make it their struggle. All right? Okay. This is a great tactic. And I'll show you, I'm going to show you a kind of little graphic or a board later that will hopefully help you with this. But it's called Steal Their Thunder. All right? And what that really means is, look at the person who you're going to be talking with. In your regionals, it won't always be a big, high-powered, battle between two people. It may be just you and the presenter, but let's always anticipate the fact that the presenter may not be your best friend. At the end of the day, good media, good news, what they're trying to do is, show a balanced discussion. All right, so they will hit you with some very obvious questions. Yeah. So if you're talking about climate breakdown, they're going to be saying, well, what can we do about China? What can we do about India? Yeah. Or why should I care? Or, that's problems happening elsewhere. Or there are some scientists who say that climate change isn't anthropogenic. It isn't caused by human activity. Or look at the stuff they're going to hit you with about the student strike tomorrow. Okay. So the obvious question that I anticipated was, students should go to school because that's where they're going to learn, and by bunking off, and the guy did say this, by bunking off, they're just having a good old jolly, and really, if they want to get ahead, if they want to do well in the world after they leave school, then they should be staying in school and learning. So what you do is you anticipate what that person is going to say to you, and you're going to grab it before they say it. So, what I was able to say was, Well, in actuality, you're going to hear from, what's his name, Simon. So Simon's going to say to you that, of course, young people should stay in school because really that's where they're going to learn in a way that will prepare them for the world, okay? However, what we would say is the fact that the world that they're being prepared for isn't there anymore, is in a serious threat. So therefore, your argument doesn't really stand up, and the young people are correct to be going out tomorrow because the fact took notes in French, writing in English from now. Okay, sorry. I'm going to turn that off because that's distracting me, folks. Not anyone's fault. Yeah, so you anticipate what they will say to you, and before they can say it, you say it. All right? And you say, for example, this teacher, he will say that you have to stay in school rather than go out and strike because you need to prepare yourself for the rest. You need to prepare yourself for the rest of your life. And then, of course, you might say that, Simon, but the fact is, that was his name, Simon Moore. The fact is that the world that they're being prepared for isn't there anymore, is in serious threat. So you get what I'm saying? Steal your thunder. They're going to kind of try and hit you with a strong line, and you say their strong line first, and then go on to say in clear terms that come across as common sense, you say why they're wrong. You know, that just leaves them floating there. What can they do? Okay, so anticipate their line, okay? Acknowledge it and then better it, all right? The difference between them and us, okay? So, you know, push this all as common sense, all right? Now, take it to the bridge. So for all those, who's the guy who sings Take It to the Bridge? What's his name? Take it to the bridge. Everybody, what's his name? You don't know, Robin? Okay, someone get on the chat. What's his name? You know, the great, get up, get up, get up.
James Brown.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good God, what kind of rebellion is this for crying out loud? Okay, so James Brown, take it to the bridge, Daddy-O. Thank you, LOL. Okay. This is a brilliant tactic. It's really, really cool to use. Everyone does it. Let's face it, folks, you may only have 3 minutes. I only had 3 minutes today, all right? 3 minutes is awesomely short, okay? And very often you may have a presenter who really isn't keen on you getting your message out. So one tactic they may well use is just chuck you a red herring and off you go down some road trying to talk about something that's really not important, but they want you to waste your 3 minutes. So what you say, I mean, I've written a couple of the good ones down here, all right? What you say, you can say things like, so that the presenter or the person you're opposing, you know, comes out with some kind of either a really, really difficult thing or a total red herring thing, okay? And you don't want to waste your time. So you could say things like, look, I think the real question is, so just take it away, okay? Ignore their question and say what you think the real question should be. Or, well, that's a very interesting point, but I think, you know, in the short time we've got, what the audience really want to hear about is blah, 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 blah. You build your own bridge, okay? You have to own this opportunity. Remember what I said in the Matthew Wright show? It was like, you know, Joanna. That was Joanna from Big Brother. Now Jamie talking about Occupy. And then after me, it was like, thank you, Jamie. That was Jamie from Occupy. And now gastric bands. You're just content rolling over and over. So own it. Don't feel precious about this. Don't feel like, oh, I'm so lucky to be here. I better do what they're saying. I better let them command it. Rubbish. Okay, you own this. So if they're going to ask you a question that's super difficult or it's something that you know that's a total red herring, which is a really common thing, then say, well, you know, that's an interesting thing to ask, but in the short period of time we got, what I think we should be talking about is this, and then just go off with that. Or I think really the question we should be addressing is this. So own it, okay? So that's take it to the bridge, James Brown. All right, next one. Now this is going to be quite complicated, because you know, I've prepared this brilliant map, which of course is total mirror reading, which is really annoying. But I will be able to.
It's okay, Jamie. We can see it. It's not mirror reading. I can see it fine on my screen.
Oh, so you can see it correctly. You can read that correctly, Robin. Yes.
Everyone can.
Oh, of course you can. Sorry, luckily I was a teacher, but I wasn't a science teacher. That's a bit of relief, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, so. Let's get you the simple thing first. 3927. Now, I won't tell you the whole story of 3927 because we're limited in time, but all you need to know is this, all right? all of you, this is the whole of your regional groups, not just your media and messaging, although your media and messaging should perhaps construct it, but everyone, work out what the 3-9-27 is. That's 3 points in 9 seconds using 27 words. All right, so obviously you don't have to stick to 27 words, and it doesn't have to be exactly 9 seconds. But what you want to be able to say is 3 points, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da, and da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, it goes like that, 9 seconds. And everyone should have it able to rattle off. You know, the one I used today, schools have not been telling the truth. Young people are frightened. They need our support and no longer our patronizing. Okay, so in other words, you've got a real nugget there. Okay, so it's some people call it the phrase that pays. But what's the key line that you want to get out to the audience in this short media moment? All right, it's really, really important. You know, we all remember that. Can you say that again? So 3-9-27. What's actually it's quite difficult to. Can I say that again? I'm not sure how do you mean? Can I say that again? I'm not sure.
I think roll with it, Jamie. And
roll with it, Daddy. Thanks for the tip. You should be my manager. Okay, so I'll quickly go over it again. So 3-9-27. Everyone needs to be able to tell it in a nutshell. In a nutshell. Okay. So 3 points, 9 seconds, 27 words. All right. Just the 27 words. Got you. Thank you. So schools have not been telling the truth. Young people are frightened. They need our support, and no longer do they need our patronizing. Okay. And with it, I had a little quote, which is, you know, we could use Greta Thunberg, of course. I mean, Greta Thunberg is a complete gift to all of you who are doing media tomorrow about school strike, because you cannot argue with Greta Thunberg. You know, and one of the key ones that she's got, that she said about 2 months ago now, was we are now the adults and you are the children, which I think is really an explosive thing to say, and it's brilliant. Okay. All right, so yeah, 3-9-27. So always work on your 3-9-27. That's your key message. That's you all remember strong and stable, okay? So you know it sounded robotically ridiculous that Theresa May kept saying strong and stable, strong and stable, strong and stable. But actually, psychologically, if you repeat a line a lot, it does go in. So if you do a really brilliant media moment, all right, you can get in your key line twice, you're doing really well. And listen to the people who are really good at media. You'll go, there's the key line. You'll hear it. It rolls off really well. It's really clear. It's erudite. It's tight. It's complete. Okay. And if they're really good, you'll hear it twice. Yeah. So 3-9-27 is a complete gift. Okay. So let's do these ones. Right. So I was a bit nervous about this being recorded because of these tips. These tips I'm about to give you are based on a lot of experience, and I don't want, you know, everyone to know about them, but I want you to know about them because you're rebels. So this is stretches, smiles, and stabs. All right. So stretches, smiles, stabs. This sounds crazy, but it's completely real. All right. If you are going to go on radio or TV, all right. So you're going into a studio, or maybe you're doing it from home. Doesn't make any difference. Just before you go on, go to the smallest room you can get to. So let's say it's the toilet. It usually is for me anyway. I go to the toilet in BBC studios, and I have been caught a couple of times, and it's embarrassing, but it's really worth doing this. So you go to the toilet and you stretch, but not like, you know, your normal yoga stretches. Yeah, you stretch as in try and touch the ceiling and that wall at the same time with your leg, and then do it the other way around and try and touch the ceiling. No, try and touch the wall with this leg, and then touch the floor with this arm, and basically stretch the hell out of the room and touch things, touch the wall, touch the ceiling, touch that wall at the same time as that wall. Okay, I know that's crazy, right? But this is, you know, scientifically proven fact, folks. What it means is you do those stretches for about 2 or 3 minutes, covering the room, touching the wall, the ceiling, the floor. Okay, and what that does is when you go into the studio, your body owns the space. It's incredible, but it's a really great tip I'm giving you. Your body exudes command over the space. Your voice exudes command. It's mad, but it totally works. And there's pictures out there apparently of all these senators in America who are on a huge spiral staircase, and at each big bend of this huge staircase, there's all these like, you know, overweight senators doing their stretches and stuff. It's because it works. Physically and psychologically, for some weird reason, you have this totally powerful demeanor by having owned a space with your body. So that's your stretches, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the other thing is this: smiles. It's mad, but again, this is a psychological truth, okay? If you are smiling all the time, okay, not like, you know, maniacally, but if you're smiling, Mark, who's doing the ironing, he could have the sound turned down, but if you're smiling, Mark psychologically is going, this person is cool and calm and knows what they're talking about. Smiles are immensely powerful, okay? And what's even weirder is that this works on the radio. So I used to do BBC Radio London a great deal. I used to review the papers on BBC Radio London, and I doubt there's anyone as old as me out there at the moment, but there's a very famous old DJ called Tony Blackburn, yeah? And he's been going since the 60s. He's a total legend, man. But while I was preparing for the show, in would come Tony Blackburn. So Tony Blackburn, you've never seen anyone looking so miserable in your life, man. He's just like slovenly old fella. He's got his record cases in his hands, and I couldn't work out, are those clothes or those pajamas? What are you wearing? And he just would shuffle along, looking just miserable, right? And then you see him going into his show, and then you hear it. And his show is, hi, it's really good to hear everyone. We're going to have a great show today, and there's some fantastic music. Sandra's already on the phone, and that's going to be great. He's talking through a smile. Listen to them, folks. Go home. Listen to the right way. You are at home. But, you know, on the radio, all those great presenters, there's a smile in their voice. So even on the radio, talk through a smile. It's psychologically proven to have a very, very positive effect on the listeners, yeah? I mean, think about it. If you're not talking through a smile, if you're being overly serious, if you're being overly nervous, so your body's all clenched up and your voice is all very fast and very nervous and blah, 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 you know, who's going to believe you? You're trying to convince us. But if you're relaxed, if your body is relaxed, if you've done your stretches, if you're smiling and your face is relaxed and you're at ease and you're breathing, then whatever you're saying, you're already winning people over by the way that you're saying it, which is really exciting, okay? So that's your stretches, and that's your smiles, and here comes your stabs. So your stabs are basically, if you please do your research. So who are you up with, okay? So if you're on the radio, and it's just the presenter, well, look up that presenter. Find out everything you can about that presenter, all right? See, Jeremy Vine, that was his show I was on today. And the thing with Jeremy Vine is he's got 2 daughters, all right? Well, that's massive, because I'm talking about climate breakdown, I'm talking about Extinction Rebellion, I'm talking about the schools coming out for strikes, you know, for climate strikes. He's got 2 daughters of school age, it turns out, 11 and 15 years old, I believe. So that was a really important thing to do research about, wasn't it? Because that's something that I could say, well, what would your children do? What would your daughters do? What do you think as a dad? I did a show quite a while ago where I was up against the legendary Darth Vader of all, Mark Littlewood, who I mentioned at the beginning, right? So I was able to look him up. That's how I was able to say on the radio show, well, the thing is, Mark, I mean, I'm not sure people realise, you know, you're speaking on behalf of Institute for Economic Affairs, which sounds really impressive, but I don't think people realise that it's actually just a front that's funded by the tobacco industry, the banking industry, you know, the oil industry. So, you know, really that truth should be known as well, Mark, because it sort of makes the audience have a bit of a different view about everything that's coming out of your mouth. So you do that research, you do the stabs. You know, if you want to really go to town on that, you know, you could pretend you don't know this stuff. You know, and I've done that in the past as well. I won't go into the details because, you know, this will end up on YouTube. But, you know, again, if you do research and you find stuff out about people, you know, you can hold that back for quite a while and act like you're very innocent. You know, often there's a green room, so you're waiting with the guest that you're going to be on. And quite a lot in the past, I've acted, you know, very innocent and quite afraid of being on mainstream media. And I kind of ask nervous questions to the person I'm with. But really what I'm doing is gathering intelligence, which I can then use when we go live. I don't feel bad about that because I haven't ever been on a show where I'm not speaking about something I believe passionately has to happen. You know, so it's about climate change or stopping fracking or dealing with the neoliberal system. So I never feel bad about kind of using that technique. So that stretches, smiles, and stabs. They're really useful, folks. I hope you use them. Okay. This one. This is, again, just so easy to do, so please do it. So I believe that some of you are going to be on BBC Scotland tomorrow talking about the students' climate strike, right? So tell your pals, tell your mum, tell your auntie, tell everybody, all right? Because the battle is not just on the screen or on the radio, it's on the social media that's attached to it, all right? So, you know, when I did the show today, for example, so on Twitter, what I did was I did a tweet saying thank you to BBC Radio 2 and Jeremy Vine. So thank you, and I atted them for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about, you know, students' strike for climate, opportunity for me to advocate for it. I really appreciate it. Thanks very much. You know, and did a couple of other. I think I did put Greta Thunberg in there. I think I might have put Extinction Rebellion in there as well, and also the hashtag the student strike. So what happens is, if they retweet it, which they did, so Jeremy Vine, whatever, 700,000 followers. So that suddenly, it's still kind of the discussion can continue online in social media. So that's why you need loads of your people out there to respond to people who might attack you for what you're saying. You need a lot of people to give cogent response to those attackers, okay? And that's really, really, really important to do, all right? So, you know, create a big army of supporters who will continue to support you online. You know, comments pages underneath articles that you might have quoted on, stuff like that. It's really important to do that. And make sure that you don't attack people. There's no point in being mean, angry, ugly, any of that stuff. But, you know, you can really give balanced, your friends can give very balanced defenses of you. And that's really good. Amazingly, people don't do that. And another thing, when you go on your regional shows, folks, write to them afterwards, say, thank you for that opportunity. You know, be professional about all this, right? Don't just go, oh my God, you know, that was amazing, and just run. You know, we want to keep doing this. Extinction Rebellion is going to go on for quite a long time. Yeah, so you want to kind of develop these good relationships with journalists. Remember, you're just content. You're just a little slot in between gastric bands and Big Brother. Yeah, so make their job easy by always turning up on time, and then when you do what you say you're going to do, and then afterwards write to them saying that was great, thank you so much for the opportunity, you know, anything else I can do, you've got my details, we can help give you other spokespeople, you know, if you want spokespeople of different genders, or you want younger spokespeople, you know, give them this smorgasbord of support and make them think. So you're talking now about the producers or editors, make them realize, wow, you know, this person's making my job easy. You know, because they're just knocking out content all the time. As long as they've got someone on their Rolodex who won't let them down, they'll come back to you. And that's really, really important, you know. All right, but also remember, tell your pals, tell your mum, you know. I've had, you know, people have rung up after I've been on a show, and I've been, you know, one was talking about a particular article, right? And so I've had a friend ring up that show afterwards saying, wow, that person was brilliant. We've got to get him back on again. What was the name of the article again? You know, so again, you've got the broadcaster still promoting what you've been promoting even after you've gone. Yeah, use all these things, folks. You know, it's not just you going on as a spokes and that's it. Okay, you've got your teams, you've got to support everybody. And then just also on that matter, by the way, try not to keep using the same people. Try and turn over the whole time. You know, you can use training videos like this one you're watching, and there'll be opportunity for us to come around and give more media training as and when you need it. But you know, try and keep turning over the people who are representing you. It just looks good. It's a lot of pressure on one person, which you don't need. But also, you know, it's got to be clear that this is a movement for everybody. It's not just, you know, a couple of people are running it, because that's just not the case. All right. So here's a sort of a complicated bit, I suppose. You know when. Yeah, here's the sound effects that you need, ladies and gentlemen. So, you know, if you come on. Right, and this is how I started, because no one trained me at all, yeah? I work for New Internationalist magazine, basically. There's my plug. New Internationalist magazine, worked for them for 8 years, and I'm their spokesperson. And I got lucky, you know, people just kept getting me on shows, and it's just because I was mouthy or funny or something, I don't know. But I had to learn on the job, so there's a lot of big mistakes I made to start off with. And one is over-preparing and coming in with tons of notes, you know. So you know, you're on the radio and they say, well, Jamie, what do you think about the way that the Syrian crisis is developing? And I know I've got notes on it, but all you can hear on the radio is, oh yeah, you know, flash. That's no good. So what you do is these prep card, one piece of paper, Okay, you're allowed one piece of paper. You can have two if there's one special thing that you want separate, but really it's this one prep card, and it looks like here's one I made earlier, ladies and gentlemen. So at the top you have, well, first of all, yes, exactly, ladies and gentlemen, smiling is that important that you actually have a picture of a smiley, and I'm not joking. Make it big. Smiling makes a big difference. All right. So at the top, you're going to have the names of the people that you're on with. All right. Because you can forget, you know, some of you will get nervous. I mean, everyone gets nervous. It's quite difficult. Don't worry. It gets easier-ish. But you'll have the names at the top because sometimes you might forget them. And that's a bit embarrassing. You know, you're on with Jon Snow and you suddenly go, yeah, thanks very much, geezer, because you can't remember his name. So written at the top. Okay. So what you've got there is, the person I was up with was Simon Ward, so I looked him up. He's 66, he's a retired teacher, so a little bit of details. For me, 66 was very important because I was planning for the opportunity to say, well, the fact is that from your perspective, climate breakdown is very, very different from the perspective of someone who's 15 because you're 66, okay? And then, of course, down below, Jeremy, and the fact that he's 53, just a year younger than me, and the fact he's got 2 daughters. So you have written the name of the people you're up against, all right, or up with, all right? So that's important. Now, next thing is my story. So you see that, my story. So on this one, I was a teacher for 25 years, okay? So do you remember when I was saying earlier on, you know, make it their struggle? So the way that you do that is basically to make it personal straight away. Make it personal straight away. So any personal links that you've got to that story, make it their struggle, then you use those. You know, I gave you a couple of examples. If you remember, you know, talking about disabled people against cuts, right? So if you're talking about disabled people against cuts, I'm not disabled, but I wrote an article about it. And if I was just saying, you know, I've been to some actions and I've written this thing, that's rubbish. But one of my best friends is disabled. And so I talked about him. And I was talking about him with love because I love him, you see. And so it was a personal story. You make it your story. You know, if you're talking about, like I said, if you're talking about climate breakdown, have you ever been to a country where you see climate breakdown being lived as a living experience, or have you experienced? Perhaps some of you worked in the Calais jungle, for example, or some of you worked with refugees who have really been pushed out of their countries by continually failing crops, etc. So, you know, if you have personal contact with the story, always flag that up straight away, okay? So that's what I mean by my story. With this one, it was easy because I've been a teacher for 25 years. So, you know, I have a right to talk about young people. All right, the next one, 3927. So that was my 3927. All right. And underneath it, steal their thunder. Okay, steal their thunder. So if you remember, what that meant was, in fact, I've got it here. Simon will say, so that was the teacher, Simon will say, best chance to get on in the world is to go to school, but the world that school prepares you for isn't there anymore. So basically, before Simon can give his argument, I give his argument and then better it through common sense. So, you know, that's the steal their thunder thing, okay? And then down the bottom, stats and facts, ladies and gentlemen, stats and facts. I would usually use 3, okay? And these ones are quite straightforward. I mean, Mim and whoever else is talking tomorrow about the Students for Climate strike, right? 10 lessons, okay? You have 14,000 lessons as you go from primary school all the way up to the end of secondary school, okay? So that's from the age of 4 until the age of 17. There's 14,000 lessons, and you can go through the whole of those 14,000 lessons where only 10 of them talk about climate change. Now, that's the kind of stat that knocks your audience's block off, okay? And if you remember when I was talking to you earlier on about, you know, build a bridge, take it to the bridge. So today I was only on for like, I don't know, it's about 2.5 minutes. So I didn't get to do everything I wanted to do, but I could see the time was going. And so I just took it to the bridge and said, well, look, one thing that is really important for your listeners to know, if they're only going to know one statistic, it's 10 lessons out of 14,000 lessons will mention climate change. Okay, so get that stat in, all right? The other one I've got is there is no mention of climate change in the entire primary school curriculum. Okay, make sure you know what you're talking about, by the way. Don't just make this stuff up. And then the last one is, yeah, the Article 12 of the Paris Agreement, okay, says that enhancing education around climate change is an absolute necessity. That's not a quote word for word, but Article 12 of the Paris Agreement did say that we've got to start educating all kids at all ages. Okay, we have to enhance education. So there's the three sort of facts or stats that I wanted to use for the story today. But lucky I don't need that again. But what is also important is be careful with your stats and facts, right? It's no good to say, you know, like I said, we did a lot of fracking stuff, and there's no good saying, well, you know, if that aquifer gets poisoned, which is very likely, it will eventually get poisoned. If you've had fracking, eventually they will become orphan wells, which means that no one actually owns that abandoned well anymore. But the casings will crack, and the water will get poisoned. Brilliant! I'm doing all right for time. So anyway, so with a statistic, yeah, if you're talking about something like large volumes, you know, if you say, yes, and that aquifer has 452,000 litres in it, what does that mean? What does it mean? But if you say that aquifer has 97 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of water, okay, everyone can get that picture in their head, okay? When I was doing a campaign about Stop HS2, which is going to go up past 100 billion, and it's just a neoliberal con trick, by the way. But 100 billion, you know, we kind of know that figure. Obviously, it's quite a well-rounded figure. But one of the activists worked out, if you put a stack of 50-pound notes, okay, a stack the height of a double-decker bus on every chair in Wembley Stadium, that's 100 billion pounds, which is like a really good way of visualizing the statistics. So, and Robin came up with a fantastic statistic about the amount of damage that will be caused by climate breakdown is equivalent to the asteroid that's hitting, the asteroid that hit us however hundreds of thousands or million years ago or something, you know. But just make it visual for people when you're using statistics. Always make sure that you're correct in your statistics. And you know, if you've got room on your little prep papers, they're usually that big, you know, keep it quite small. But if you've got room on your little prep paper, then you can actually add the source as well. So according to, you know, United Nations Article 12 in 2014, blah, 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 you know, page 62, it just makes it really clear that you know exactly what you're talking about. So that is your prep card, folks. That's the whole prep card, all right? And that's really what you've got in front of you. And it really works, yeah? It really, really, really works. I did, you know, and all the stuff I've been telling you about really works. That stretching thing, okay? It looks mad, right? But it totally works. So please do it. All right. Let's go for questions. I think because we're doing well for time. It's 7:46. So could you facilitate and see if I can be helpful, Robin?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jamie. What a great presentation. Just on that stat, it's yes. When an asteroid hit our planet 650 million years ago, we're losing animals at the same rate as when that happened, which is insane. Okay, so one of the questions that came through was, can a media liaison person and a spokesperson be the same person, or should they be different people?
That's a really cool question. I would recommend that they're different. So media liaison is the person who's setting up all the interviews and doing it all. And that's a specific skill set. I mean, they generally would make quite a good spokesperson, but I think it's very important to keep them separate. And in terms of going back to the media platforms that you're using, so let's say it's BBC Scotland, for example, it's a very professional relationship if BBC Scotland continues to hear from the same media liaison officer from Exile Scotland, and yet there are different spokespeople each time, but the media liaison person is always separate. It's very, very professional. Yeah, and remember, you know, for every time you've got a spokesperson, you can have a lot of people who are supporting them. You know, that prep sheet, you could have a lot of people who are doing the research to help and stuff like that. But yeah, that was a really astute question, and my advice would be keep the media liaison officer separate to your spokespeople. Great question.
Fantastic. And we got another question, which is about the idea of keeping it personal, making it personal, which you talked about. And Sam in the chat asked whether it's enough just to talk about their own child as a cause of concern, or whether they need to directly link it to something like climate change. What do you think about that?
These are great questions, Sam. Yeah, definitely talk about your own child. If you start by saying, you know, you're legitimating, you're advocating for the climate strike tomorrow, then starting by saying, well, before anything else, I'm a dad, and I'm completely concerned of the future for my child. There's no one who's going to be watching who's going to go, well, you know, that's a bit naff. Everyone's going to relate to that. Huge amount of people listening to you or watching you are parents. So if you definitely start by saying, I'm a parent, I've got a 15-year-old, I've got a 5-year-old. I can't help but look at them and fear for what their future is going to be like, you know, and start like that. But then don't stay just on the personal, but you can start there and then move on to the wider story that you're going to get across. But again, wicked question. Next, please.
The next question is about getting into the space with a reporter to be able to talk about these kind of things. If you're in action, if you're doing an action, how can you make sure you get a reporter to sort of speak to you there and then about what's going on?
Okay, right. So let's say you've got an action, folks. So your your media and messaging team will have put out a press release. And in your press release, you'll have at least one, but I'd advise 2 media officer phone numbers. Yeah. So if media turn up, they will ring that number and you'll go, oh, brilliant. Right, where are you? We'll come and find you. And that's it. You're going brilliant. You know, and you will say in your press release, you know, we have great spokespeople available for you. So, you know, you're making their job easy. So they will phone your media number and you'll come and meet them. And then they'll say, great, you know, we're ready to do, you know, is it okay if we do an interview with one of the people? And you'll go, great, that's fantastic. Yeah, we've got Joanna, she's fantastic. She's all ready to chat with you. So really what they should be doing is contacting you so that then you can go ahead and set up the interview. And remember, it's all about being professional, making their job easy. In general, journalists today are paid peanuts. And they've got tons of press releases every day and stuff, and it's not an easy job. So make their job really easy, be really efficient, really reliable, really professional, and they will come back. Show that you understand the nature of their job. Don't just use them and abuse them. Work with them.
Great, thanks. And then one more question, last one coming through, is around XR's messaging in general, really, which is there are a number of issues that XR is focusing on. We've got the climate breakdown, mass extinction of species, the failure of democracy in this country. Is it better to focus on one of these issues and take it forward in an interview if you've only got a set amount of time, or can you try and get them all across? What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question as well. It depends on the nature of the interview. You know, what are they looking for? So, yeah, that actually brings up some really important stuff. Thanks for asking that question, whoever that was. So, you know, develop a relationship with the person who's booking you. What do they want? Yeah. I mean, in fact, when we had Robin on very early on with Extinction Rebellion, one of the things that he, you know, missed out was he didn't ask, will I be on with someone and who will it be? And it turned out to be someone from the Global Warming Policy Group. What they called again, Robin?
Global Warming Foundation. Policy Foundation. That's it.
Yeah. So always get the whole picture from the person who is going to be putting you on. You know, who am I on with? That means you can do your research on them and stuff like that. And what kind of areas do you want me to be talking about? Yeah, because they will be looking for a certain angle. So find out what that angle is. And in that case, you're going to work to that angle, right? So you don't need to kind of give the whole smorgasbord of XR messaging. You can be just focusing on the angle that they want you to talk about. But we just did a great interview down here in North Devon with one of the spokespeople from the North Devon XR. And that was actually quite a prolonged interview. And it was the opportunity to talk about the whole picture of XR. What the journalist was doing, because this journalist, I think, works in a number of different areas. So with I think it's the North Devon Gazette we ended up coming out in, but also that journalist has something to do with BBC Devon, I think, or so a variety of outlets. And what this journalist was doing quite an all-rounder interview to get the whole picture of XR. So in that case, yeah, you know, prepare really well, which she did. She did a brilliant job in preparation, and make sure that you've got really good facts and statistics and key phrases, 3927s on all these different aspects. As Robin just pointed out, we are challenging the validity of democracy at all, and we are correct to do that. And I think everyone in this country knows that. So if you were going to be doing a sort of an interview that's covering a lot of aspects of XR, it's really important to get great lines worked out in advance about that one aspect. The importance of citizens' assemblies chosen by sortition. It's just absolutely revolutionary, and it's basically playing to everybody, from UKIP to Labour to Greens, Tories, everyone's disillusioned with democracy. It's become completely clear it's not working. Representational democracy is not working because we're not being represented. So language around the fact that XR are challenging in a very good way and fighting for a radical new remake of democracy is fantastic. But at the same time, there's all these other aspects. Make sure you are always keeping up to date with what's happening in XR. Look at the growing international solidarity network that we've got. That's going to be massive. Look at the kind of the in-depth belief that we've got in the fact that absolutely peaceful, non-violent, mass civil disobedience works. Come out with all the personal stories that you can, but also try and have good, powerful stuff to say about all these different aspects of XR. And from the point of view of the fact that many of you are the regionals, it's really important to continually remind people that this is a global movement. It's an internationalist movement. And this is a very strong network. London is being seen as a hub for the direct actions because that's the capital. It's where the most amount of economic disruption can happen. But this is a very decentralized movement. We're talking with Ghana and Bolivia and Bangladesh, as well as talking with Glasgow and Bristol and Barnstable, and do get that across. Do get up-to-date statistics about how many people are joining all the time. Don't exaggerate, because you don't need to. There's literally never been a movement that's grown this quickly. It's absolutely unprecedented. Be careful with exaggeration. Like a lot of people be going, well, Extinction Rebellion sort of launched the strikes for climate thing, and of course we didn't. But what we can say for real is that Greta Thunberg helped to declare the Extinction Rebellion on October the 31st. She drove with her mum and dad in an electric car all the way from Sweden. That's an amazing fact, because not many people knew who she was back in October the 31st. So you don't need to exaggerate, but the reality is also already very strong. But yes, in terms of answering your question, if it depends on the nature of the interview, and if they want to get an overall picture, then do your work. Do a lot of research beforehand and work with your team. What are the key things that we're going to cover, and how do we do them briefly? Can I just say something else on that, by the way? Be really careful of this. If you are being interviewed on radio or TV, or with broadcast cameras or whatever, only say what you want to say. One of the things that people do when they're nervous is they just keep talking. Okay, and if they're not your friend, they will take that back and they will edit it and they will make you sound completely different to the way you wanted to sound. Yeah, and another thing is this. Often our natural psychology means that if you want to convince people, when someone asks you a question, you want to answer the question really quickly. Go, well, yeah, no, just take your time. If I was going to sum up the entire session here of advice for all you good rebels out there, you good media rebels, I was going to sum it up in one word: breathe. Because when people are just nervous and they're not prepared, they're going to just talk and talk and talk really fast. No. The power from the viewer or the listener's point of view, if someone is relaxed, and relaxed is Well, that's a very interesting question. You know what I mean? So breathe, give yourself space. If someone has space in the way that they communicate, then they are confident and what they're saying is true. All right. Any other
Great.
questions?
Thank you so much, Jamie. I think we'll have to wrap it up there for the recording. But yeah, really appreciate your time. And if others want to get involved with press work in Extinction Rebellion, they can contact press@risingup.org.uk. Thank you so much, Jamie.
A real pleasure. Can I, one more thing before you go?
Sure.
Yeah. So what I want to say is there are going to be more of these webinars. So it's not just me. This was just me talking about how to work with broadcast media, but you're going to be getting other webinars talking to you about how to develop relationships with journalists and how to kind of pitch. All these kind of things are really important. We're also going to have one about how international members of XR, so that means people in the majority world, there's different ways of working with the media in the majority world, and also how the majority world work with Western media. So there's going to be others coming. And the last point is this: you're beautiful for being rebels. You're absolutely beautiful, and you should be proud of yourselves.
Amazing.
Thanks,
Thanks so
Jamie.
much, Jamie.
You're wicked. Thank you.